Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Enneagram series. My name is Hayden Lee, Master Certified Executive Life and Leadership Coach, and also a lover of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is something I use in all of my work and all of my coaching. And as a reminder for folks, the Enneagram is not just a simple typing tool. I really refer to it as a system of self-awareness and a system of development. Because the Enneagram is not static, it moves. So it's important for us to learn our core Enneagram type. And when we learn that type, we're able to understand how to use the Enneagram as a map to really learn and grow from all the types. Because yes, in reality, all the types are in us, but we do have a core type with which we resonate the most. But once we understand that core type, then we can use it as a map, like I said, to move around to all the other types to become our best type. And once again, I want people to really understand while they watch this Enneagram series, that the Enneagram is about motivation, not behavior. That's super important to understand. Although it's fun to kind of guess people's Enneagram types, and I do that too, actually, we all do it. But it is important to know that it's very hard to really guess someone's type because we don't know their motivation behind the behavior. Right? So Enneagram, it goes to the bottom of the iceberg, right? Where we actually try to understand, why do I do what we do? And for people new to the Enneagram, they might not even understand why they do what they do until they really take some time to understand what motivates their behavior. All right. So today I'm excited to jump into Enneagram Type 4, and we have some amazing, creative, and artistic and unique Enneagram Type 4s today, right? I'm feeding into their egos a little bit. But as a reminder, the Enneagram Type 4 is the type where their motivation is to be unique and to be authentic, right? That's the core motivation for the Enneagram Type 4. So we have two wonderful Type 4s today. We have Ashley Adair and Monique DeBose. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Ashley, if I could just have you introduce yourself, where you are and what you do. Yeah, that would be great.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Ashley Adair. I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Shoes Leadership, a coaching practice where we focus on helping first-time managers become true leaders. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and I am a crazy cat lady.
That's so fun. I just was on your Facebook the other day, and I saw when you went to CatCon, which I didn't even know there was a CatCon, and that's so cool.
It is a thing.
Well, I thought it was cool, except that people dressing up as cats kind of freaked me out. I'm not going to lie. So.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
Cool. Welcome, Ashley. How about you, Monique?
Hi, I'm Monique DeBose. I am the founder of MDB Productions, which is a creative entertainment and transformational experience company. And I'm a singer, a songwriter, a playwright, and a mom of two amazing children.
Nice. Cool. Welcome, Monique. I've had the honor to attend one of Monique's transformational experiences. There was singing, there was music, there was whispering to people's ears in the dark. It was awesome. So I definitely recommend checking out some of Monique's artistic endeavors and experiences. All right, let's jump in. So both of you have experienced the Enneagram, the specific Enneagram instrument I use, which is the IEQ9, which stands for Integrative Enneagram Solutions, which I'm accredited in. So I have studied this for many years. I'm not just doing this from a quick Google search. And you've both looked over your long, thorough assessment. So what were your first reactions as you were reading about your type? So either of you can jump in. Yeah, let's make this a discussion. Yeah. Who wants to jump in first?
Well, I'll start. I was like, yep, that's right. So the pieces, it was actually easier to digest this time because I've had some time with it. But I remember first time reading it, I was like, inside I knew it was true. And outside I was like, I don't want people to know this about me. What? So it felt like I wanted to hide it and put it away. And this time, as I've looked through it, I'm like, I have more awareness about oh, how can I actually use this to become a better person? Yeah. So that's where I'm at with it right now.
Yeah, cool. Ashley?
Totally same experience. Yeah, when I got the report the first time, first it was just yes, this is me. I finally felt seen. And oh, that's why, where it's coming from. But then also very similar. I felt a lot of judgment too. I'm like, oh, of course I'm this one. Like, this is the bad one. Like, like no one wants this self-absorbed one. Like, great. But similar to Monique, now I really, learning about the wings, which I know we'll get to today, seeing how it can really help me and where I can kind of catch myself and use it as like more of a superpower.
Wow. It's so interesting. It's like we're just a few minutes in and I'm already, feeling a little bit of that struggle that the fours have. Remember, the motivation of the fours to be unique and to be authentic. So what I'm already feeling from both of you is this idea of like wanting to be seen, but not too seen. I want to be understood, but not too understood, because if you're understood too much, then that takes away from being unique. So can you speak to me a little bit about the motivation behind about wanting to be unique and authentic, but at the same time, like not wanting to, because if people understand you too much, then it takes away from, in a way, the fours love-hate relationship with being misunderstood. Yeah, so tell me more about that. Yeah.
Well, as you say that, two things come to mind. First, I genuinely feel like, and I feel embarrassed saying this, it's like, no, I am so complicated, Hayden. People don't get me. Like, I came onto this planet with like this mom and this dad from this race, and I live in America, and like all these pieces, like it's like, no, it's real, Hayden.
Yeah.
So that is what initially like comes out as you ask that. So it is kind of like a love-hate in the sense of like, this is real. This is not like, I am unique, and like, look at it. And then I have the awareness like, oh, it could be just like your type. So I'm in the love-hate of that piece in itself. And then also there was a piece around like, you pull people in and then you push people away. And that's why, you have desires for relationship, but they're not met. And that kind of piece, that's the gist of what I got. And I was like, oh, that is so painful, because that is my true experience.
Yeah.
I've always said from day one, like, I've always wanted to have a best friend. Like, I'm 40 something and I still have that. Like, I can't wait till that day where I'm just so like peas in a pod with somebody. Yeah. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but that's my desire still.
Wow. Well, we're going to get to that blind spot in a second with what you just said about the push-pull. We're going to talk about it in just a sec. But I want to ask Ashley about the resonation with the core motivation and your relationship with being unique and authentic. How's that land for you?
Oh, I identify with it so much. I'm not sure. My thoughts aren't fully formed around it. I think I'm still trying to understand it fully. But it reminded me in high school, I was on the newspaper. I was on the newspaper team, I guess. And my opinion column, because of course I wrote an opinion column, was anything but normal was the name of it. And so when we first got the report, I was like, oh, of course. And I have this need to want to be special and recognized, but not be bothered. Like, in a perfect world, I would be like at the top of my field in something, but still be able to have a normal life. It's like, I want my cake and eat it too kind of thing. Yeah, and I'm not sure how to reconcile that exactly, because it does lead to suffering, the suffering of the four, if you will.
Wow. That conflict, I mean, that conflict that both of you are describing, but then it leads to this perpetual suffering, which we're both talking about. And back to Monique's point, which is that blind spot of, yes, fours love intense relationships. They love deep connection. They're okay with deep emotions. And with that said, what Monique was speaking about earlier is having this longing to have deep connections with people. Yet at the same time, because of the need to be unique and special, like you want to attract people, you want to let them in, but don't let them in too much. Because if they understand you too much, then it kind of takes away from being special. And it also, if they understand you too much, it takes away from being misunderstood, which being misunderstood is part of your identity. So it's right. So that's the blind spot of the two. Of the four, is like seeing that pattern. which is push-pull. It's like, come here, but not too close. So it's like, in a way, how you may behave makes it harder for you to actually get what you want, which is, those deep connections with people, but then also pushing them away, because if you let them in too close, they will understand you, and you want to also be misunderstood. So so how's that landing with you, Monique, how that could be a blind spot? And you said it's been happening your whole life.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, like, yes, check. But what it also brought up is I've always had this, you made me think about my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my mother, where it's like, why don't they just get me? I really want them to get me. But then when I've noticed that they try to come in, I'm like, oh God, get away. No, get away. But I never really equated that or thought about it as, oh, this will impact my misunderstoodness. Like it's not a conscious thought. And then also the other piece that came forward as you shared that was, I also have a desire to be, this is the best way to say it, like just to be in a forest without shoes, like talking to the trees for like 5 days at a time, just gleaning the wisdom of the universe. But it's like, the deep contemplation, like, but I want to be by myself. And I'm in that struggle because I have 2 small children. I have a husband. I have responsibilities. I can't just do that. And so I'm wondering if that is just my need to like be in suffering.
Yeah.
Because I've had people say, go, my husband has been very supportive, where he's been like, okay, let's set up time and space for you to like, go do you. And I'm like, I can't make it happen. So you're really shining some lights for me right now.
Well, before I go to Ashley, if I may add, though, we'll talk about lines in a little bit, but there's a line between 2 and 4. And when there's that line, it means a 4 can go to a 2, but it can also, but you can go to either the best or the worst parts of the 2. So sometimes a 4 can go to the worst part of the 2, or I'm sorry, unhealthy part of the 2. I want to be PC here. So it's not the worst part, it's the unhealthiest parts of the 2. And sometimes the unhealthy parts of the 2 is martyrdom. Sometimes where it's like, stepping into the like, well, I got it because no one else will do it. I just can't have the time to be by myself. I just can't have the time to work on myself. I so need to work on myself, but I have so many responsibilities. So that's what I'm hearing a little bit too, is sometimes we could step into that role of the unhealthiest part of the helper is, yes, doing things for others, but with some resentment, right? Like being the martyr of the wife, the mom, or the friend, or the daughter doing it because there is a responsibility and their duty there, but also doing it with a little bit of resentment because you wish you were really taking care of yourself, but you got to do all these damn things. So that's a little bit of the martyrdom and the unhealthy part of it too. Yeah. So what about you, Ashley? The blind spot we were talking about is a little bit about the needing to be misunderstood, but also wanting to be understood at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think how also going off of the conversation of, I think how it shows up for me is it was like the deep connection is I hate small talk. I'm good at it, but I hate it. So like at parties, I just don't see the point of, when you're standing around and, doing the small talk. I want to actually connect. I want to have like a deep conversation. And it bothers me. My husband jokes about it. He's like, you have no tolerance for fools. And I was like, I do not. Just because I want to like actually know them. So that, I think how it shows up for me is I have like a small core group of people in my life who I have let in, but I could count them all in one hand. And then everyone else, there is like a bit of, now that I reflect on it, of like, yeah, they don't understand me fully. They think they know me, but they don't know all of me. And I often find, just as we're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, like I did HR, but I have tattoos. Like I always have all of these like things. Like right now I'm getting into romance novel writing, and I'm like, I know, I'm so smart, you wouldn't think, but did you know romance writers are super smart? There's all these lawyers and doctors and MBAs who write romance secretly, like Stacey Abrams does. So I'm now, it's just kind of clicking as we're in the conversation of all the ways that I try and differentiate myself. And that's kind of, I hadn't realized it as cognate, as, what's the word? Just I hadn't been overt to like see the pattern. Now I can kind of see the pattern.
Yeah. I feel it, that struggle is real, right? Wanting to, like, once again, wanting to connect and be unique. But then how, it's interesting. I had a 4 client, and he's younger. He was like in his early 20s, but talking about the relationship with his parents, and his parents are not 4s, and he's a 4. And a lot, how a lot of people, they want to be understood, but in a way, like, he wanted so bad for his parents to admit how much they didn't understand him, because it was actually irritating him that his parents were like trying to, like, we do understand you, son, we do see where you're coming from. And he's like, no, you don't, and you never will. And it was just and like, so it's this interesting, that's what's coming up for me too, is almost like this, for, I don't know, this, for lack of a better word, like a badge of honor that 4s want to be misunderstood, because that's what makes them unique. But at the same time, that longing to be heard and so it's like such, I mean, even me saying it, it's hard to articulate, because it's that suffering in a way. It's like, oh my gosh, please understand me, but don't get too close. Like, please see me, but don't see all of me. So yeah, it's crazy. I feel it in my bones, just that struggle. So I can
Actually, I really
imagine, like,
resonated with what you said too, around like, I'm doing HR, but I also have tattoos. Like, they know me, but they don't really know me. I was like, oh yeah, that's me too.
Yeah.
I still have it, and I'm like, I guess I could share it, but I'm wondering why I'm not. So it's
Yeah. I almost wonder if we don't hold stuff back so that we have something to share. I don't know. I wonder.
That's interesting too. It's like, always having like an ace up your sleeve, or always having like a secret to hide, because and consciously not sharing it. So then it's like, oh well, even though we're all of like mind in this group, I really know I'm the one who's the special one. Or like, it's like, well, even though we're all different in this room, I'm the one who's most different.
Yeah.
Which which is a good segue, I think, to the vice. So each type has a vice and virtue. And the vice is something to be aware of. It could be wrapped up in our blind spots. The vice could also be wrapped up in like unhealthy behaviors or unhealthy ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. And for the 4, the vice is envy. And I'll explain a little bit. Envy, comparing to others, and always this lack of longing, this lack of not being enough, or this lack of something is wrong or missing. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with this idea of envy.
I've been going first. You want to go first, Ashley?
Yeah, go for it.
No, that just made me really sad. And I was like, oh, I already know what it is. I've been in the process of processing it. I'm like, but as you just spoke it again, I just got really sad. Because that has been my experience for the time I've been on the planet. Like, I wasn't, my younger sister, everybody loves her. My older sister, my parents like get her. Like, I wanted to be more like her. I wanted to be more like them. And then the whole, I'm associating it with the race piece and all this. It's, like, we're taught in our culture that having long hair that hangs down is better. So like, I went through the phases of like, I hate my hair. Like, I wish I had that. So I just have like, I've got tons of examples of envy being there, but also it really being as a vice, it really stops me in a lot of ways. Sometimes I look at myself and I'm like, I'm surprised I've been able to be so accomplished with what I have done, because all the work it takes to get through all the doubt and insecurity is exhausting.
Oh my God, yes. I just, it is so exhausting. And I don't know about you, but I know I'm doing it now sometimes. I'm like I can tell that, like, why are you comparing yourself? Why are you envying them? Like, stay in your lane, like, do the work, whatever. But it still happens. And yeah, my take on it is just it's just like, yep, that's my vice, absolutely. And it is just how I've experienced the world from the get-go. So I kind of thought that's how everyone went through the world. And it wasn't until, this and some of the work we've done that I realized, like, oh, other people aren't always like, what's nexting, or like, I always identify with, the musical Hamilton and Hamilton of like writing like you're running out of time. Like, I always feel like I gotta catch up. I have to be accomplished. So I relate. Yeah.
And I love how you mentioned the musical Hamilton, because I do know you personally have some artistic expressive backgrounds, as does Monique. Like, I don't think that's
Yeah.
a coincidence that many fours do find ways to artistically express themselves. So like, how have you artistically expressed yourself through the years?
Yeah.
Can I just express one thing too?
Yeah.
You said the comparing myself, and you just reminded me, I do a lot of improv singing, and I created an improv that is comparing myself leads me to wanting is haunting. I have a whole improv that I've created for it. I'm like,
Whoa.
that's true.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'll share it with you, Ashley.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Something else, Monique, you mentioned a little bit about when I talked about the envy is the sadness. And and I'm glad you mentioned that. So type 4 sits in the feeling center of the Enneagram. So there's 4 centers. There's an action center, a feeling center, and a thinking center. So type 8, 9, and 1 sit in the action center, and their main emotion they grapple with is anger. Types 5, 6, and 7 sit in the thinking center, and their main emotion to grapple with is fear. And 2, 3s, and 4s sit in the feeling center, and their main emotion they grapple with is sadness, shame, and self-worth. So how it resonates with 2, the helper, right? The helper, so their sadness is a little bit more like outward, and they're not outwardly sad actually, but their emotions are more outward in the sense that like they want to help, they're generous, they're outwardly giving, they're outwardly, giving their emotions to others, because they focus on others' needs before themselves. And their self-worth issues for 2s is, instead of accepting that they can be loved for who they are, they feel like they need to help in order to be loved. I'm a 3. So 3's issues with that is like achievement. And so my sadness is like, oh, if I achieve enough, if I'm the best, then I will be loved, right? And with 4s, so their emotion of sadness is a lot of it's like internal, right? That internal, their sadness to themselves, thinking about contemplating the meaning of life and how they're different and how they're so sad. Some brooding sometimes. And with the worth with 4s, it's like, because remember, 4s value authenticity and being unique. So, but to realize though that you are loved already for who you are, not needing to show or prove how unique you are, or not needing to show like, well, if I'm special and if I show how special I am, then I'll be loved. Or if I like show the world how unique I am, then I'll be loved. So it's this. So tell me about how maybe sadness, shame, or self-worth might show up for you.
Wow.
I know.
How does that? No. I think one of my favorite things to do is to have some solitude time. So, like last year, I did have that conversation. I was like, honey, I think I need to go away. And the premise was a writing retreat, but I think it was also that, and also like have some brooding time, have some just like space to think. So I think it's so important, and in the past I viewed it as kind of the sad thing, like this, like, don't do it, don't feel it too much. But in the personal work I've done around it, I think it's okay to let it in, and then kind of you can embrace it for what it is, what it's trying to tell you. But what you said, Hayden, about like kind of like that conditional, like you're worthy if you do this or that sort of thing, I have totally worked, like, yes, that's completely me. And it's taken a lot of work, and I think it will be my life's work, which is just like, hey, right now you're enough. Like, you don't have to do anything else. Like, right now you are good, you are worthy right now. You don't have to like do anything. Yeah.
Well, and you're loved for who you are, not because, oh, I love you because you're so unique and special and do things differently. No, it's like just as is. You know, it's like
Mhm.
there's no need to be unique. It's just Ashley herself is lovable. Monique herself is lovable
Mhm.
without the unique part, if that kind of makes sense. Like just the being is, that's
Yeah.
why we're lovable, all of us. Not, there's no
Mhm.
condition to it. Yeah. What about you,
Yeah.
Monique? How's like sadness or shame or self-worth show up for you?
All the time.
You're like, yeah, check, another check box. Yeah.
Next question. How does it show up for me? Yeah, it like I said, it stops certain projects. I have these amazing ideas and things that come, and I'll create and I'll create and I'll get it to a certain point, but then it's like, oh, well, if I share it, then people will. It's so it's that constant. I have so many projects that have been shelved because of that. So that's how it shows up. I'll be embarrassed by, or and now like time is coming into it as well in a bigger way, because I'm 45. I just turned 45. And so that piece is like, you're still trying to do something to make a difference or to be unique or to like make an impact. 45. So it's like the shaming piece just keeps showing up when I'm in my equanimity mind. Like, it's just like, it is what it is, period. Time doesn't mean anything, but like those pieces are, check.
Yeah.
Let's just say check.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that virtue, Monique, because we want to go from vice to virtue, where the virtue of the four is equanimity. And equanimity in two ways, both inward and outward. So inward equanimity is actually finding the balance between positive and negative. You know, because fours tend to skew a little bit for the negative. They focus on the suffering piece, or they focus on the negative piece of, oh my gosh, I'm 45. But it could also be, oh my God, I still have 50 years of my life. You know, so equanimity is internally, it's giving weight equally to both positive and negative, and actually making a more conscious effort to focus on the positive, because it's very easy sometimes for the fours to focus on what's missing instead of focusing on what's already there, right? To focus on what is working, because it's very easy for the fours to, because once again, remember, fours have a kind of a bias for suffering. There's a bias for wanting, for lack of a better word, wanting things to not work, because when they don't work, it adds to the suffering, right? Which, remember, so it's like almost, like I said, it's so interesting. I find myself using the word enjoy. It's not that fours enjoy when things don't work for them, but in a way, it's like secretly maybe hoping, I don't know, secretly hoping it doesn't work, because then it adds for the topic of suffering, because fours like to share the suffering. So equanimity, that was the virtue. So the internal equanimity of finding all the wonderful things that already are working, finding all the positives that are already within you. And then outward equanimity is stop comparing to other people, and to actually accept the hard truth that we're actually a lot more alike than we are different. Right. I mean, we are, I remember when I did some one-on-one coaching with Ashley, it's like calling Ashley out. Like, I think you're trying to like differentiate yourself. You're trying to make yourself an other, and I'm like, but actually it's not that different than every other human on earth. Even though like being ordinary is the worst thing a four can ever do or feel, but there's truth in that and freedom in that. Is like,
Mhm.
yes, while we are all unique and different, of course we are, but also at the same time, we're all very much the same. We're all very much going through the same struggles and same triumphs. So tell me a little bit about how the virtue of equanimity, both internal and external, could be a step towards liberation for you both. Tell me about that.
Well, I know when I saw that was the virtue for the four, the first time I was introduced to the Enneagram, I was like, oh, this is it? This is what we get to like get to? Fucking just, oh, sorry, just like just things being fine. I'm like, no, I was so mad about it.
Yeah.
Check. And as I've sat with it and started to digest more, I'm seeing like there is some grace in it for me. It's like, oh yeah, I'm understanding that I lean towards negative. It doesn't mean I'm bad or wrong. It's just like that's what my tendency is. Okay, and it has some value. So it makes me want to go more and look for the positive more because I can see it. I can see the bigger picture. Yeah.
Same reaction as you. That's so funny. I can't believe someone that is like me, of course. Yeah, I had a lot of resistance to that being the virtue. I was like, yeah, really, like, oh, great. I was like, this doesn't seem, I got a bad one. Like, I want a better one. But it's still really hard for me to, because my brain does definitely, it goes, I see what's not there. I see the negative, to the point where like I consciously have to edit emails to flip it. So I'll write it like the negative, like we can't do, or we don't, and then I'll go back and edit it to a positive. So it says like, I'm sorry. It's like, hey, thanks for waiting. Me too. Yeah, it's all I see, and the thing that is cool though is seeing that, but and realizing, yeah, like I'm not negative. I like as a person, that's my default. And so you can make a conscious choice to flip it, but it is conscious and it is something that I just have to work with. So like my therapist always starts every session because she knows this. She's like, what's good? And so we can't talk about like what's not good yet. She's like, I'm sure you have plenty of that. Like what is going well? And so that's kind of a practice, like as a person, is like I have to be deep in gratitude. Or else it can, because it feels so good in like a twisted way of, it feels good to see what's not there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what you said, it's like equanimity in terms of seeing both the positive and the negative, but there's a bias towards the negative for fours. But also the idea that the virtue of equanimity is ordinary, which is like, I know it's going to make you both scream and run for the hills, but really, but in a way, both of your reactions to that virtue is like, what the F? You mean you're telling me that me being ordinary and embracing being ordinary is going to help me be better? And the answer is actually yes. Because it's being able to balance that all of us are so super ordinary and super extraordinary. We're both. But in the forced search and need to always want to show and be extraordinary, you're missing out on all the beauty and actually uniqueness of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which I think is a really, really good point I want to make for fours and everyone watching, is to remind fours that there's actually beauty and so much specialness and uniqueness in their ordinariness. Right, stop trying, sometimes to stop trying so hard to be different and finding actually, well, a lot of what makes you different is how you do the ordinary. Right, it's like the mundane, finding the beauty in the mundane actually. So not needing to try so hard to always stand out is actually, what makes, a lot of times it makes us fit in, because it's actually the opposite. Obviously, as coaches, we all want to embolden our clients to find what makes them unique and stand out. But for fours, sometimes it's almost the opposite. It's like, well, how are you the same? What actually makes you ordinary? How are you not unique? So I think that's the work, that when the fours actually take time for that, it will then actually get them to the next level. Yeah.
I just want to state that my whole body, I'm tuned in. I'm just like, there's sadness. I'm like, all right. Like that's I'm conscious of it, but it's just kind of like, okay. Like,
well, no, I thank you for being honest. Yeah, but it's the truth. It's hard. That's the work. It is the work for the four. It's, to it's like funny. Like I'm envisioning me being like a parent to a 4 and being like, you know what, Susie, you're not special. I mean, it's like, I would never say that to my child, but that's kind of sometimes what 4s need to hear. It's like, Susie, you're really not that special. You're not as unique as you think. I mean, it's like you don't want to say that to your kid, but that's a little bit the truth for the 4. It's like So a couple more points, because I could talk for hours about this stuff. The instincts, right? The subtypes. So Ashley and Monique are both, the core type is a 4, but they're different subtypes of 4s. So remember this, there's actually 27 Enneagram types. So within each core type, there's 3 subtypes. So the instincts is what makes a subtype. So the instincts, as a reminder, are self-preservation, which is, first and foremost, taking care of your own needs, your own material needs, your own security needs, looking after yourself. That's self-preservation. The one-to-one instinct is your intense relationships with certain people, really valuing the intensity, the one-on-one experience. And the social instinct doesn't necessarily mean social in terms of outgoing or extroverted, but social meaning in terms of like being aware of the group, a social hierarchy, belonging. Their core type is about somehow influencing the group or the community. So with that said, Ashley is a self-preservation 4, which is actually the counter type. The counter type is the type that acts the least like the other types. So as a counter type, self-preservation 4, Ashley does value being unique and different, but her flavor of being unique and different is like really focusing on like, I'll be different by achieving and going for my goals and, showing people like my goals, but not talking about my suffering, like keeping more of her suffering to herself. So having like a more sunny disposition maybe than other 4s, but still having that deep suffering and silence. So how's that land with you, Ashley, as a self-preservation 4?
Oh, definitely. Well, on so many fronts. So a lot of people, like, I have this problem where sometimes I don't talk about the journey enough. Like, I'll just talk about like the highlights, especially on social media, and I'm guilty of it, but also I don't want to talk about how sometimes it's not good, right? So if I'll usually just go off on my own and go figure it out on my own, and do the suffering by myself. So yeah, I'm even struggling to talk about it because I'm like, oh, I don't want to out myself. I don't want to, that's not good for preservation. So it shows up like that, like not wanting to see the whole picture. You just see like the beginning and the end, like I got into school, I graduated, but like you aren't seeing like me crying in the bathtub, because of an economics final. and what I found though is when I do share that, I feel so much better because I feel seen, and I feel like other people it's the equanimity thing. People are like, yeah, me too. I mean, one of the best moments in this MBA experience has been me realizing that like I am strongly average. Like like my whole education career, I've always been an outlier, very high achiever, etc. And now I'm like, I am a strong B+ kind of girl, and that's okay with me. Like now, I still am like, oh no, maybe that's bad, but it's like, no, it's still good. So I think that's how it shows up for me. And then also even just like in the pandemic life, I had a whole stock of stuff because I am always coming from that self-preservation kind of point of view. And I can sometimes be perceived as selfish because I have no problem putting my, metaphorical air mask on first. And so sometimes I'm misunderstood, I guess. And it has come back actually professionally in some feedback of like, where they were wondering if I was a team player, and I was like offended deeply. I take that so seriously. I'm like a no, all hands on deck, we're all in it together kind of person. But when I would refer to things like as it related to me as a way to relate, like such a 4 thing to do, But if, we were all in a stressful situation, I would focus on my project first because self-preservation. And so this tool actually helped me explain it too, but also look for it. So I could kind of navigate that. Yeah.
That's a great explanation. And also what you said, focusing on your own project first, in self-preservation also is because that's your way to set yourself apart from the others as well. Because remember, there still is that underlying need to be unique and authentic and different. So it's like, I'm going to be unique and different by setting myself apart and focusing on like my stuff first. That's what's going to make me different, and not being so outwardly talking about your struggles. Because which is interesting, fours are very comfortable with emotion, with vulnerability, and but the self-preservation four is the four that is least likely to outward show emotion or talk about her pain and suffering. That's why she's maybe crying in the bathtub by yourself. You don't talk about it, but be honest here. I bet you've cried in the bathtub by yourself.
Oh, that's absolutely real life experience. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You don't talk about it, but it happens. Like the emotions are real, but you're not talking about it as much. So Monique is a social four, which is a little bit different. So the social four is really about thinking about the group or the company, the group, the social dynamic, the social hierarchy. And in terms of the four, it's about wanting to be appreciated and seen for her struggles, seen in her suffering, and making sure that everyone knows about the suffering, and learning from the suffering, or like, how can we all suffer together in a way? How can we learn from the suffering together? But also, like, like I said, wanting to make sure that others know that there's suffering going on. So it's a little bit different than the Ashley who doesn't talk about suffering, but Monique who has no problem outwardly talking about suffering. So tell us about that.
You're right. Well, I wrote a one-woman show called Mulatto Math, summing up the race equation in America. And my mom is still very hurt and angry from what I shared in that show. And so I'm actually just looking at it again through the lens of a four. But I needed to tell my story. Like, my body was developing a desmoid tumor because I think I was trying to, as best I could, keep all the suffering, keep all the emotions. I think I was trying to be a self-preservation. That's what you're supposed to do in society. You're not supposed to put stuff out. And my body, that was what actually put me over the edge. My body developing this tumor really was like, okay, you have to speak. There were moments where I was writing this show and it's very edgy. And I was typing and I was bawling my eyes out, just like, I cannot say this. It's like, you have to write this for your own preservation, but like to get myself in alignment with this whole social piece, I guess. Somebody also told me, your problem in life is that you're too righteous. And I was like, that might be my problem. Okay. But I cannot walk away from it. So I want everybody to know, like, in this instance here, I mean, it's been underlying for 400 years, but in this instance, like, there's not equality, and I cannot be in a world where you think that that's okay. Like, everybody must know about it. And I'm the person who I feel like I'm very terrified in the world. Like, I don't want anybody to hurt me. I don't want anybody to hurt my kids, so it's kind of it's a weird space. I think why I'm bringing that up is like, it speaks to like the innateness of this like motivation. I don't know about the motivation to be special or unique in this case. Hayden, make it clean.
Well, it's not necessarily the unique or special in this case, but it is about the suffering piece. It's like the suffering piece where Ashley's suffering is more to herself, and then Monique's suffering can be more outward. And but also what happens with the outward suffering in a social four is also sometimes like feeling that your suffering is more than someone else's suffering. So that sometimes shows up for the social four too, is it's like yes, you have suffering, but let me tell you about my suffering. So it's and not just about the race equation in America. It's just about general suffering too. It's for the social four to maybe believe, like you share everyone about your sufferings, and other people may say like, oh, I know how you feel, and you're like, you do, but you don't really know how I feel. So that's what I mean about like how you're suffering, which goes to a little bit about, you're both alluding a little bit to of maybe the righteousness or self-righteousness, or Ashley said selfishness. And I used the word a little bit of self-absorbed, where sometimes the four like being, like, well, yes, you don't really know what it's like to suffer in this way, which is a little bit of that self-absorbed, which Ashley would mention a little bit about feedback she got from her work is like, Ashley kind of thinks that she's special, more special. And then with Monique, even you talking about the suffering where the pain is real, it is real. But then to somehow think, like I said, your suffering is somehow more important than other people's suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Woo, all right, last thing. We are talking, this I think has been the longest one so far, which makes you both unique. This has been the longest interview. It's the lines of development. We want to use the Enneagram as a system of self-liberation and to develop into our better selves. So the lines for the four is 1 and 2. 1 being the strict perfectionist and 2 being the considerate helper. So we want to use those lines to to be the best of the 1 and the 2, not the worst of the 1 and 2. So the best of the 1 and 2 or the best of the 1 as the perfectionist is structure, having high principles, discipline, following through, being reliable, doing what is good, and having self-control. Managing emotions. So that's all the best of the 1. The best of the 2 that consider, I know Monique's like, manage emotions. The best of the 2 considerate helper is truly serving, truly helping people with generosity, putting other people first before yourself, focusing on other people's needs, other people's emotions, truly empathizing, truly helping from a place of wanting to help, focusing on the positive in others. So tell me, out of those lines, which line may help you develop most in this instance where you are in your life right now? I'll start with Ashley. Yeah.
I think for me, it's the structure piece. I find I want to just be guided by my feelings and emotions. I want to, like, when I'm in the mood, then I'll do whatever it is. So sometimes I have to just go with that, with that feeling. Like yesterday, I was like really feeling productive. I was like, okay, we better do it because I'm in the mood. We better I cleaned everything. But for me, it's structure. And so especially right now, having less structure, I am having to implement even more than I normally would to be successful. And so then if I'm not having, that feeling, I have the structure in place to like get done what I need to get done. And I notice whenever I don't like bring those two things together, that's when things don't happen and I get frustrated. So those are, right now, that's what's helping me the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I hear you say, because before sit in the feeling center, right? So even how what do I feel like doing today? Who do I feel like talking to? And although there's merit in that, obviously we have to use our thinking center and action center. And sometimes our thinking center is, well, 1 sits in the action center actually. So let's actually talk about the action center where the 1 is structured in their action. Even if they don't feel like doing something, they know it's what needs to be done today. So being conscious of the strength of the 1 is taking structured action, and then even sometimes in structured thinking too, right? Because if the 4 may come from a place of what do I feel like doing, so you also need to be structured in your acting, and then also structured in your thinking though too, like sitting down to plan with logic and analysis with absence of emotion, which is hard for a 4 to do, but sometimes you got to see things without the emotion. Like, what is the next logical step rather than what do I feel like doing? What about you, Monique? 1 or 2 or both? Like, what kind of is a good line for you?
Well, in this moment, I mean, both have been really important, and sometimes they feel like they're outside of myself. I feel like I've known I need to be a kinder person in this instance, but it's a very conscious thing. When you were speaking about the email, Ashley, my flavor of that is like, I'll just get right down to what the business of the email is, and then I have to go back and say, hey, how are you? This has been going on. How have you been feeling? Like, to like check the box of like, oh yeah, I know I'm supposed to be like of service and connected instead of just going for what I want. But in this moment, it's the one, having structure and discipline, and follow through. Because I wake up every day to, I'm like, what do I feel like doing? What am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling sad today. Yeah, I'm not going to get to the 3 things I need to make sure I get done. So things just don't get done.
Yeah.
And it's really funny. My sister, I don't know what her Enneagram type is, but she is a list master. She just writes lists. Oh, I'm writing my list for tomorrow. I write lists all the time, but if the tomorrow comes and I don't feel like doing it, it doesn't happen. But her, it happens. I'm amazed by that.
Yeah. So she makes the list and she follows through with it.
And she follows through.
Okay, good.
I can
Yeah.
make the list. I've got 80.
Yeah. Yeah. Oops. I hear some feedback. Is that you, Ashley? That was weird.
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. So so Monique was saying, yeah. So your sister's good at making lists, which you're good at making lists, but she's good at executing and follow through the list, which could be a development piece for you, which is the one. Definitely, like the ones are have that self-control and structure and discipline. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. We've gone a long time diving into the heart, mind, and body of a 4. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. So I'd just love to hear from Ashley. Actually, before I ask the final, I'm going to ask in a second your final point you would love to share with the world about, about what you love about being a 4. But before that, thank you, viewers. If you've been patient enough to watch this whole fascinating series today and interview today, thank you. Make sure to visit me at haydenlee.com. That's HAYDENLEE.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can watch all the rest of the Enneagram types, as well as we're probably going to do a panel of having all 9 types on at one time and talk about how there's 9 perspectives to tackle this one challenge. Isn't that going to be, that'll be fun. So lastly, I want to open it up. So Ashley and Monique, what do you love about being a 4? What do you want the world to know? What are some inspiring words that you want the world to know from the place of a 4? So who wants to start? I know, I'm putting this pressure on you. Yeah.
I'll go. I think the beauty of a 4 is that we do feel so deeply and we can connect so fully. And no matter what the emotion is, even the ones that don't feel good, like the sadness and the ones that we've spoken about today, there's still so much beauty in that. And in the mundane, even though we want to be special in the mundane. So
Yeah.
I think
Nice.
that's for me.
Thank you, Ashley. Monique?
I think for me, it's also like the ability to feel so deeply. I think that is one of my greatest gifts. I feel happy that I can feel. And it's also being tuned in. This is my special part right here. But like in a space with people, sometimes I can feel their feelings and I'm conscious of them before they are, or they may never even be conscious of them. So that to me is actually kind of a really cool experience of the 4. And we're so creative. That's amazing to me. So
yes. No, we didn't. Thank you, Monique. We didn't even get a chance to talk about your music very much. And then Ashley has done a lot of musical theater. We didn't get a chance to talk about, but it's yes, 4s, both your points, the ability to feel deeply, love deeply, but also create such beautiful art in the world. I mean, it's quite amazing. Before there are a lot of the world's best creative geniuses are 4s, but then at the same time, there's a lot of suffering from the 4s, as well. With that said, I want to make sure that you two know that I send you a lot of love and that you are loved simply for who you are. Not because you're unique or not because you're special or you got to do things specially. Simply who you are is worthy of love, and you are loved simply because of your worth as a human being in this world for who you are. Nothing to do with what you produce in the world or what makes you stand out. So the worth comes from the being, just being who you are. So thank you very much, and thank you, viewers. This has been wonderful. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.